All right, listeners, get ready to level up your UPSC international relations game.
Yeah.
Because today's deep dive
All right.
is taking us into the world of Jeremy Bentham.
Oh,
This is a thinker whose ideas
yeah.
are so relevant today, even though he was writing centuries ago.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
when it comes to the UPSC,
Yeah,
people usually just think about Bentham and utilitarianism.
right.
But trust me, there's so much more to this guy.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree.
Especially for understanding things like liberty,
Yeah.
rights, law,
Uh,
and even international relations.
okay, so for our listeners who are deep in their IR prep,
Right.
why is Bentham someone they need to understand?
Well, let's start with liberty.
Okay.
Bentham didn't see liberty as some inherent right that we're born with.
Okay.
He saw it as the absence of external constraints.
Interesting.
He argued that rights,
Yeah.
they're not something mystical or natural.
Right.
They are actually created and protected by law.
Okay, that's definitely a different take on things. I mean,
Yeah.
we hear a lot about natural rights,
Yeah.
but how does this, I guess, more legalistic view of liberty,
Right.
how does that actually play out on the international stage?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting,
Okay.
especially for a UPSC aspirant,
Okay.
because think about it. If rights are grounded in law,
Right.
then international law becomes the key framework for understanding and addressing issues like human rights violations or
Right.
conflicts between nations.
So instead of appealing to, I guess, some kind of abstract notion of natural rights,
Exactly.
we need to focus on
Right.
building up strong international legal mechanisms, institutions, things like that.
Institutions, treaties, courts.
Yeah.
All of that.
It's a really practical way to think about it.
It is.
It's insightful.
Yeah, and this also ties into his principle of utility.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
So Bentham believed that actions, policies,
Yeah.
even international relations,
They should be judged by their ability to maximize happiness and minimize suffering.
right, the famous greatest happiness for the greatest number.
Exactly.
But how would someone prepping for the UPSC
Right.
actually apply that principle to complex situations in international relations?
Okay. Well, first of all,
Yeah.
it can't be as simple as just counting smiles, right?
Definitely not.
So think of it more as a lens
Okay.
for analyzing policies, treaties,
Yeah.
or even military interventions.
Okay.
So let's say you're studying a UN peacekeeping mission.
Right.
A Benthamite approach would assess its impact on the overall well-being of the people involved.
That makes sense.
Does it actually reduce suffering and promote peace?
Right.
Or does it create unintended consequences
Yeah.
that might actually make things worse?
So it's like going beyond just the surface.
Exactly.
And really dissecting those impacts.
Yeah.
Not just knowing the history
Right.
or the legal framework, but also understanding the real-world consequences.
Yes, the human cost of it all. Yeah, that human cost.
And Bentham would argue that those consequences need to be measurable.
Right.
They can't just be based on feelings or ideology.
Makes sense, although I imagine that's where the challenge comes in.
It is a challenge.
Quantify things like happiness and suffering.
Yeah, especially in the context of international relations.
Okay, now I know we have a lot more to discuss.
Yeah.
But I do want to touch upon something that I found really surprising when I was reading Bentham.
Okay.
And that is his views on women and gender equality.
Oh, absolutely.
This is an area where Bentham really was a progressive thinker,
He was.
even by today's standards.
Yeah, way ahead of his time.
He was advocating for women's rights long before it was a popular thing to do.
Absolutely.
And he argued that women are just as capable as men and that they deserve equal treatment under the law.
Equal treatment, equal rights.
I mean, he's writing in the late 1700s, early 1800s.
I know, right?
That's pretty radical for that time period.
Yeah, it really was.
So what specific rights was he actually advocating for?
Well, he supported women's suffrage,
Oh.
the right to education.
Yeah.
And he even questioned whether marriage should be seen as a contract that can't be broken.
Really?
Yeah,
I mean, think about it. Back then, women were considered property of their husbands.
it's true.
But Bentham saw this as a violation of the principle of utility.
It was a violation.
He argued that by excluding women from public life,
Right,
society was being deprived of their talents and contributions.
exactly. So it wasn't just about morality for Bentham. It was about maximizing societal well-being
Yeah,
by empowering everybody to contribute their full potential.
I love that.
And this connection between individual rights and societal progress.
Yeah,
It's a key takeaway for UPSC aspirants.
I agree.
So when you're analyzing things like gender inequality or development,
Right.
Bentham's framework encourages us to consider those broader social and economic consequences.
Yeah, really insightful. I'm
Yeah.
loving this. I'm already learning so much, and we're just getting started.
There's so much more to cover.
I know, I'm excited to keep going.
Me too. And this idea of societal progress really comes through in Bentham's work on colonialism.
Oh, interesting.
He was a huge critic of it, and he argued that colonialism was ultimately harmful
Yeah.
to both the colonizer and the colonized.
That's interesting because colonialism was kind of just the norm back then.
Yeah, it was.
So what were his arguments against it?
Well, Bentham saw colonialism as this blatant violation of the principle of utility.
Okay.
He said that the exploitation and the subjugation that was inherent in colonial rule,
Yeah.
it created immense suffering for the colonized people.
Right, of course.
But it also corrupted the colonizers, morally and politically.
It's not just about the economic exploitation then,
No.
but also those moral and political costs
Absolutely.
that colonialism inflicts on everyone involved.
On everybody.
And how does that thinking apply to international relations today?
Well, think about issues like neocolonialism,
Okay.
economic dependency,
Right.
and the legacies of imperialism.
So we're not just talking about historical events,
No.
but understanding how those historical patterns
Yes.
of exploitation
Yeah,
are still shaping global politics today.
they are.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
let's talk about another area where Bentham kind of challenged conventional wisdom,
All right.
and that is his rejection of the social contract theory.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah, it trips up a lot of UPSC aspirants.
It does.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar,
Yeah.
the social contract is this idea
Right.
that individuals agree to give up some of their freedom
Right. The consent,
in exchange for the protection and order that's provided by the government.
it's a trade-off.
Right, and it's a foundational concept in lots of political philosophies.
Yeah.
But Bentham straight up called it a fiction.
He did.
Why did he reject something that seemed so fundamental?
Well, he believed that the social contract, it was basically a historical myth
Okay.
that was used to justify the power structures that already existed.
Interesting.
He said that real political legitimacy,
Yeah,
it doesn't come from some agreement that was made in the distant past.
right.
It comes from a government's ability to promote the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people.
So instead of focusing on abstract ideas like consent or natural rights,
Exactly.
Bentham is grounding political legitimacy
Yeah.
in the actual outcomes of how a government operates.
In the results. Yeah.
Like, how effectively is it promoting the well-being of its citizens?
Exactly.
And how does this idea apply to international relations?
Well, if a state's legitimacy rests on its ability to maximize happiness for its people,
Okay.
then things like international cooperation and
Okay.
global governance,
Yeah.
they become really important
Okay.
for achieving that goal on a larger scale.
So there's this really fascinating link
Yeah.
between his domestic political philosophy
Mhm.
and his vision for a more peaceful and just world order.
Absolutely. It all ties together.
This is why understanding Bentham's perspective
It's so valuable.
can be such an asset for someone studying for the UPSC,
Absolutely.
because it gives you that deeper understanding
Yeah.
of how all these different concepts,
They all connect.
they connect
Yeah.
and how they influence international relations.
And how they influence the world.
So now let's move on to another key area of Bentham's work,
Okay.
his plan for an universal and perpetual peace.
This is a big one.
Yeah, it's a work that outlines concrete steps for achieving world peace,
It does.
which is something that is always a hot topic in international relations.
Always.
But Bentham wasn't just dreaming here.
No.
He was actually very practical in his approach.
He was.
So what were some of his key ideas?
Well, one of his most radical ideas was the reduction of military forces
Okay.
and the emancipation of colonies.
Wow, he's going right to the source there.
Yeah, he's tackling the root causes of war.
Instead of just trying to manage the conflicts after they've already happened.
He's trying to prevent them from happening in the first place.
It's a very proactive approach.
It is.
What else did he propose?
Well, he also advocated for establishing international courts
Okay.
to resolve disputes peacefully.
Right.
And he really emphasized the importance of international law.
So he's laying the groundwork for things like the United Nations?
Yes, exactly.
It's like he saw the future of international relations unfolding.
He was really ahead of his time.
Another key aspect of his peace plan
Yeah.
was his focus on public opinion.
Yes, public opinion as a force for peace.
Because he believed that open diplomacy and transparency
Transparency is key.
would hold governments accountable.
Accountable to their citizens.
To their citizens.
And less likely to go to war.
So he's advocating for a more democratic and participatory approach to international relations.
Where citizens have a voice.
Where citizens have a say.
Yeah.
That's a powerful idea.
It is.
And it definitely resonates even today.
It does.
Yeah.
He also talked about free trade and economic interdependence.
As tools for promoting peace.
Yes.
So the idea is that when nations are economically intertwined, they're less likely to go to war with each other.
They have a shared interest in peace.
Because it's in their own best interest to maintain those relationships.
Exactly.
And that's really relevant today.
It is.
Given how globalized the world is.
Yeah, globalization has made us all interconnected.
And that interconnectedness can be a force for peace.
It can be if we use it wisely.
Bentham really was ahead of his time.
He was a visionary thinker.
It's amazing how Bentham's ideas are still so relevant today.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up,
I
have to ask about one of his more, I guess, controversial ideas.
Right.
The panopticon.
The panopticon.
It's a prison design.
Yeah, it is.
But it always sparks these debates about surveillance and control.
It does. It does.
So remind us what the panopticon is all about.
So it's this circular prison with a central watchtower in the middle.
Right.
And the way it's designed, the guards can potentially see any prisoner at any time.
Wow.
The interesting part is that the prisoners never know if they're actually being watched.
It's kind of like this ultimate mind game.
It is, yeah.
This constant possibility of being watched is supposed to keep everyone in line.
Yeah, even if no one's actually watching.
Bentham saw it as a more humane and efficient way to manage prisons.
He did.
And he even thought it could be applied to places like hospitals and schools.
Yeah, he thought it had broad applications.
But obviously it raises a lot of questions about privacy.
It does.
And the potential for abuse of power.
It does, yeah.
It's almost like he predicted the modern surveillance state.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of.
With cameras everywhere and all of our data being collected.
Right, those parallels are definitely there.
So how does this apply to international relations?
Well, UPSC aspirants should definitely think about how Bentham's ideas about surveillance and control relate to debates about things like internet censorship, government monitoring, and the whole balance between security and freedom.
It's a tough balance.
It is.
But it's an important one.
Yeah, and it's something that we're grappling with more and more in the digital age.
Bentham's giving us a way to think critically.
He is.
About those trade-offs.
Those trade-offs between security and liberty.
In a world that's so interconnected.
Yeah, in a world where technology is constantly evolving.
Now, beyond the panopticon,
okay,
Bentham also had some interesting ideas about legal reform.
He did. He did.
He really wanted to codify laws.
Yeah, he was a big advocate for that.
Make them clear.
Clear, accessible.
Accessible, consistent.
Consistent, yeah.
It's like he wanted to take the mystery out of the legal system.
He did. He wanted to make it understandable for everyone.
Yeah, he believed that a good legal system should be based on the principle of utility. Promoting fairness.
Yeah.
Preventing discrimination.
Preventing arbitrary or discriminatory practices.
He even argued for using plain language in legal documents.
He did.
So that ordinary people could actually understand their rights and obligations.
Exactly. It's about empowering people.
It's about making the law work for everyone.
Yeah, making it accessible to everyone.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening.
It has.
Bentham's ideas are so much more than what you usually find in textbooks.
They are. There's so much depth there.
So for our listeners who are on that UPSC journey, what's the one big takeaway about Bentham?
Well, I would say it's his commitment to using reason and evidence to make things better for everyone, both domestically and internationally.
Whether it's his critique of natural rights, his advocacy for women's equality, his vision for world peace,
his vision for peace.
Or even the panopticon.
Yeah, the panopticon.
Bentham was always challenging us to think differently.
He was always pushing the boundaries.
He was a thinker who was constantly asking us to question our assumptions.
Yeah, to question everything.
To look beyond the surface.
To dig deeper.
And to really consider the consequences of our actions and our policies.
That's such an important skill.
It is.
Especially for anyone who wants to shape the future.
Especially for those aspiring to work in international relations.
Yeah, to make a real difference in the world.
So to all our listeners out there, if you want to ace those UPSC exams,
Right.
Channel your inner Bentham.
Channel your inner Bentham.
Question everything.
Question everything.
Analyze rigorously.
You browse everything.
And never stop learning.
Never stop learning.
And don't forget to check out some of Bentham's lesser-known work.
Yeah, like his Dialogues with the Dead.
It's a really interesting idea.
It is.
Where he imagines having conversations with great thinkers from the past.
Yeah, it shows how much he valued engaging with different perspectives.
It's a testament to his constant pursuit of knowledge.
Absolutely.
And of course, to make sure you don't miss any future deep dives.
Right.
Hit that subscribe button and give us a like.
We'd appreciate it.
We're here to help you navigate the complexities of the world.
Yeah, we're here to support you on your UPSC journey.
And equip you with the knowledge you need.
The knowledge you need.
To make a real difference.
To make a real difference in the world.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Keep diving deep.
Keep diving deep.